The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, 50 Acres webinar. I'm pleased you could join us. I'm just trying to get my screen to fill the thing. Just bear with me. Here we go. I think that's better, but I think you can still see the thing on the side, so my apologies for that. Might be able to make that better. Just bear with me 1 second, sorry. My apologies. For some reason, I cannot get the sidebar off it, but I think you'll just all have to bear with me. So thanks so much for joining us. Today we're going to be looking at how to prepare your organisation for the upcoming election. Obviously, we all know that that's just around the corner. Just through the webinar, there is a dashboard on your screen, there should be, where you can pop in a question into the side. Please let me... Oh, thanks, Jessica. Click the right-hand arrow on the left-hand side of the screen. Okay. Sort of done that in the middle of the page. I think I've done that. Maybe this is going to do it for me. Thank you so much, Jessica. Sorry, I feel like a complete idiot. So if you're needing any more questions or have, in fact, technical suggestions like Jessica and been able to help me, please pop them into the box. That was fantastic. So today we're going to be looking at preparing ourselves for the election, which is very much just around the corner. Things are hotting up, really, I suppose. They've been hotting up for some time, and I don't think they're going to get any slower than they are. So let's think about where we might need to think about being in the next few weeks. So to start with, I think, obviously the federal election is just around the corner. And with only, just a few weeks away until it's called, and I think probably it's likely to be called just after Easter, potentially the Tuesday after the Easter weekend, there's still really a genuine opportunity for you and your organisation and NFPs to continue to have an impact. I think some people think, oh, it's too close now. If I haven't done anything, I may as well just wait. My view is I wouldn't do that. Even if you did something small, it's better than doing nothing. This is an opportunity to get someone to listen to you, potentially respond, and potentially even agree to what you're asking for. So I think rather than doing nothing, I think the best thing is to don't sit on your hands and do something rather than nothing. I think probably is the safest approach. There's a couple of options and we'll explore them in a second, but you can plan, I think, an effective low budget campaign focused on media, community and government, and those key stakeholders, and aimed at really getting their attention, and we'll explore that in a second. You'll obviously need a pre-election campaign that dovetails effectively into something that can transition you to a post-election activity around your key issues and messages. It is good to think about how what you're doing now will move forward into what might be a new government, or it might be a very close result. We don't know. But it is good to think about something that has some longevity to it. So who are the important people from the NFP? who are the important people for the NFP sector to be thinking about? I mean, before we get into that, I think, you've all probably been watching, just like me, the coverage of the asylum seeker issues around Manus and Nauru. And I think that there is, a genuine attempt by the government to shift the debate to those border security issues, which obviously would be useful and play to that safe, secure borders concern and fear that they see as potentially gaining them votes or bringing back some leakage of votes to independents and across to Labor. There was a poll on the weekend, Sunday night, which was released on Monday morning, Ipsos, which indicated that there was a little bit of, or there was a swing to the government. A number of people have sort of said that it was quite a significant swing against the opposition, so 4%, and also a significant swing to the independents, and also the Greens vote was very high. So Ipsos is always seen as a little bit unstable as a result. On the weekend, on Insiders, and also through the week, various commentators have sort of said that they'd like to see 3 or 4 polls consistently indicating that there is a swing before they start to think that there is some sort of issue for the opposition in this. And you probably would have seen that during the week yesterday, the opposition attempted to shift the debate by saying that anyone who was on Christmas Island could get medical attention there before they were taken to the mainland for medical attention. So I think Labor is trying to diffuse the issue, no matter what you think of it and where people need to be. I think that, obviously Labor is cognizant that they potentially have a problem and are trying to diffuse it so that the election isn't just about border security, which for all of you out there, all of you from organisations and not-for-profits, is really important. I think it's important that we don't just have an election about border security, because that election is really just, to a large extent, fairly nonsensical, to be honest. But welcome your comments or welcome your thoughts. Very happy to have a discussion about it. So who are the important people for the NFP sector to think about? Obviously, I think if you're engaging in any meaningful way, either by social media, sending out, a tweet or a Facebook post or an Instagram post that you copy in someone into, or it's an email, or it's a call out, shout out to your supporters to engage with people. You can't ignore the party leaders. I think it's really important to talk to the party leaders. Yes, the party leaders get lots of correspondence, but they are the leaders, and there's a good reason why they get correspondence and get people approaching them for that very reason. So I think it is important to loop them into your campaign or your communications. The other thing to keep in mind is the key stakeholders, the key ministerial and shadow ministerial stakeholders in your particular space. So if it's health, the health minister and the health secretary, the health shadow minister. If it's aged care, the aged care minister and the aged care shadow minister, etc., 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 depending on what it is that you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to prosecute. The other really important group of people to talk to is local MPs and candidates. So you'll obviously be able to, you probably already do, or many of you already do have connections and networks with local MPs, senators and candidates. But it's really important to let them know that you're going to be campaigning on these issues and not ignoring your local MPs, because it's them that are going to be feeding back that intelligence back to their party leaders and to the senior people in the party. And so I think if they know that there are people out there campaigning on something, then that's another really valuable, really powerful conduit to be able to communicate further up the food chain and therefore perhaps have an impact and change the dynamic and change what you can achieve. The next thing we need to sort of think about is what do we do from now until the election is actually called. And, there's, obviously it's between now and probably just, I would think, the Tuesday after the Easter weekend. Don't hold me to it. I don't have a crystal ball, but that would be my best guess based on what everyone else seems to think is happening. So let's have a think about what we can do in those few weeks between now and then. We're talking about 6-7 weeks, I suppose, from now until then, which is a reasonable amount of time. So what to do now? I think presenting you here with a couple of different options, and obviously you might combine some of these ideas, but I think the first thing to think about is putting forward an idea, a policy initiative, or a funding ask. Now, many of you have got ideas already in the pipeline. Some of you, those ideas are in their infancy, and some of them, they're really well developed and you've already got documentation. Perhaps you've made budget submissions to the federal government budget submission process, which recently closed, or you may have already been in discussion with some government ministers or shadow ministers about the potential to get support for an initiative. If you have, keep pushing those. You may not have got the answer that you expected or that you hoped for, but you need to keep pushing those because, quite honestly, right at the moment, government and opposition are still looking for things to throw money at. Believe me, I was in Parliament last week with 4 or 5 different clients, and we had a number of initiatives that we got. We were flagged that we'd either get government or opposition support for. They are still very open to submissions. They may not necessarily be through the formal budget submission process. In fact, going straight to a minister or their advisor is a way of short-circuiting those formal processes. I'm a great advocate of short-circuiting formal processes. I've never been a great believer in them. I understand they exist. You have to participate in them. And there are rules and regulations and, lines you've got to queue in and, people you've got to, nod and bow to. But at the same time, I'm an absolutely very strong advocate of going straight to the organ grinder and not talking to the monkeys. And by that, I mean the public servants. There's a huge public service in Australia. They all do a fantastic job. But unless you're talking and you're often engaged with public servants when they are engaged with your program that it's already been funded. Public servants are usually a conduit for a decision maker, i.e. the minister or an MP or someone in power to make a decision. They're advising, they're obviously making services work, but in terms of decision making, they're usually recommending decisions rather than taking these sorts of major decisions themselves. It's always important to keep those relationships positive and productive. If you have relationships with public servants, they're absolutely vital to foster, and don't lose sight of that. But I'm always a firm believer that if you've got a minister's office on side, you can almost at the click of 2 fingers, a thumb and a forefinger, get money so much more quickly than you can ever going through a departmental process. And unfortunately, that's just how it is. That's why government people are ministers and the like are vital to get in front of. So if you have an idea, a policy initiative, a funding ask, you may not have developed it. It may be in its infancy. If it is, that's okay. You still got a bit of time to put something together. And when I'm talking about an idea that you might put in front of people, I mean, there's sort of ideas that I'm putting in front of both government and opposition at the moment for funding support for not insignificant amounts of funding is 2 pages, 3 pages, 1 page. We're not talking about a 20-page document with fully funded budget and expenses all sort of detailed. We're talking about something very, very simple, which outlines the objective of an idea, how it might work, how it might be structured, and what it might achieve. And I think people lose sight of the fact that they think they have to develop something that is huge and extraordinary before they can even approach someone. Most of the time, the meetings that I take people into or I accompany people to, really we have an idea. We have an idea. We have an argument about why it's going to work and why it's needed, but we don't usually have it worked up into something that's really, really huge. It might be 1 or 2 pages. And that's really all you need to do to start that sort of discussion going. Please remember that. Please don't feel that you have to have something that's really sophisticated before you move forward. What else can you do between now and the election if you've got something to talk about? Well, you can do direct engagement, as you might have already started. You can approach people for meetings. You can try and have a phone meeting if they can't do a face-to-face. Talk to their advisors if the MPs or ministers or candidates aren't available. You'll get that. You'll get a lot of talk to the hand, and don't accept that. Push, and keep pushing very politely, but very stridently and firmly, that you are representing, X or Y group of people in their electorate, stroke state, stroke Australia, stroke wherever, and they're duty bound really to talk to you and give you some time, particularly in the context of the election campaign. And I think you will get engagement. An advisor is really important to talk to. You don't always need to talk to the minister directly. Please remember that, because you probably won't always get a time with the minister, but you probably will be able to get a time with the advisor. You can lobby marginal seat candidates, and I think that's a really useful thing to do. Look at all the marginal seat candidates in Australia, perhaps the top 20 if it's a national issue, the top 20 in Australia, or the top 5 or 10 in your state if it's a state-based issue, and tell them what's going on. We're talking all of the candidates in those marginal seats. So, Liberal or National, Labor, the Greens, and any key independents. In some seats, you might have 10 candidates. You obviously don't need to talk to all of them. You need to make a bit of an assessment about what sort of support they might get in the election. They might be quite influential, independent candidates. And if they are, then I think it's probably a useful thing to talk to them. You can deploy mainstream media and social platforms, obviously, to support your mission as well. So don't ignore that, and create a social and media campaign to support what you're doing, either through your existing website, or perhaps even consider starting a landing page or some sort of small, very simple website that will focus people's attention, that you can get them up pretty quickly, and you can get a lot of those off the shelf and get them up and running pretty quickly these days. Either look at Squarespace or WordPress or Drizzle or one of those sorts of sites. Squarespace is really easy, and buying a URL is really easy as well. So the second option, well, what to do when you don't have perhaps a specific ask, or something that's sort of developed into a policy, or something that's really robust, or a program, or something to ask that's pointed and pretty singular. It's more of a broad issue or a broad idea that you want to canvass or that you want to talk about. If you think about it, though, most ideas do have a pointy end. They have, I suppose what I would say is that most of the time you've got to, achieve that change, or the change that you want through some sort of parliamentary or formal process, getting government or decision makers or someone to fund or back or change what they're doing. So ultimately, an idea does usually, when you're talking about government engagement and government facing campaigns, generally it ends in something that it looks and feels like some sort of deliverable that a government might assist you with. If you're still if it's a broad brush campaign, you can also look at generating a widespread community-based campaign, which obviously requires a lot more work, and resources. It may also get you a lot more attention, obviously, if you can get that up and running. And you may already have the basis of a big group of people that you can mobilize and get going. And that's just fabulous if you can do that. Think about how you can mobilize those people. We're doing some work at the moment with a whole range of different organizations around pre-election and election-based events. You can, for example, ask every single, if you've got supporters for your cause or your organisation in most states and territories or in lots of areas in the country, you can ask every single supporter to do one thing on one day, whatever that is. It might be that they're going to go somewhere and deliver a balloon, or something that's visual. If you can think about how you might gain some media, a visual representation of what you're doing, think about how you might be able to mobilize the supporters that you already have got to do something. Take it to the streets, take it to the candidates, let them know that you're concerned and that you've got a big groundswell of support, and that groundswell of support's only getting bigger. That also could involve advertising, might involve a budget, but it also involves a lot of rolling your sleeves up and work, really, to make that work and a success. So that's, before you sort of go down that road, just make sure you've got a team of supporters to try and make that happen. So what else could you do? You can get involved with pre-election announcements. In terms of, as I mentioned, we've been talking to government and the opposition about a range of different things, and once some sort of funding is supported from either the government or the opposition. Obviously, if it's the government who is supporting some funding, the likelihood is that funding will be announced in the budget on April the 2nd. The budget is on April the 2nd this year. If it's the opposition will indicate, make a formal announcement that if elected, they will support X or Y program or initiative or event or whatever it is that you're doing, to the tune of X amount of dollars, and that money would come through at some time after if a Labor government was elected. It's difficult to know exactly. It depends on how big or small that amount of money is. If it's a small amount, small amounts can be organised before a budget. Obviously, the first Labor budget wouldn't be until May 2020, so that's a way off. But there is opportunity for a Labor government to make some out-of-budget payments, both through ministerial discretion and also through MyEFO, which would be around September, October this year, which is a mid-year economic forecast, where they're allowed to make additional payments. It's sort of like a sort of mini budget, if you like. The other thing that they can do is amend the tax bills that come out of the budget process, emerge and amend those to contain support for some of their big lever projects. So there's lots of ways that an incoming government can have influence on spending. You can't imagine that a new government, if they're elected in May, can't do anything about spending until the following May. It just wouldn't work like that. There's lots of different levers that they've got to pull. So you might be that you get support for something that you're doing. The opposition or the government wants to do a pre-election announcement. If it's something that's visual, and get you to do an event with them, that's something that you could do. Even if it is not around funding, if it's around an idea, generally speaking, at this time in the cycle, they probably associate a spending commitment to some sort of announcement. That's just what they're tending to think about and do. But you could, obviously be party to some sort of general, support for some work that you're doing already that perhaps the government has been funding, for example, and they just want to sort of bring some light to bear on that, or something that the opposition has been supporting for some time, for example, and throw some light on that as well. So there's a range of ways that you could look at getting involved with some sort of pre-election announcement. You could ask your supporters and members and networks to support you, including community toolkits. So providing some social media material. We're talking about social media tiles or an avatar that people can put on their social media platforms, their social media feeds. So you can upload an avatar to Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever it is that you are, just to indicate your support for something, and your members and your supporters can do the same. You could give them content to put up on their social media feeds. You could give them details, email addresses of politicians you would like people to contact, and give them some suggestions as to what they say to those people in terms of what it is that you want the government or opposition to do. It's always a good idea to give people an idea of what to say. You don't really want to leave them to their own devices just in case they get rude or don't say the right thing. So I think that's always really important to think about. Don't dismiss the use of the media as a conduit to let the local community know what you're doing to improve their lives in relation to the issues. So I think it's a multi-directional thing that you've got to think about. It's not just you lobbying government. It's about you growing your support in the community and within your sort of direct stakeholders to make sure that they know what you do. So if you don't tell either your members or your supporters or the community what you're doing, then your support base will remain static, or at worse fall. So during this sort of time of intense activity, it's really good, I think, to use the media as a conduit locally. Think about your local newspaper. They are always really keen to get content. So if you can provide them with a photograph that you've taken yourself, I'd advise you to get a professional photographer to do that. And then take the photograph, have a story, have it all really ready to go, and send it off. And I think it's a really good way of just maintaining the awareness of with the community about what it is that you're doing, so that you're making sure that you're garnering all of that support. What else can you do between now and the election? You can get organised, and obviously it's really important that you actually are getting organised now, rather than thinking, well, we'll wait until the election itself. We won't do anything. We'll just get ready for that 6 weeks period. Well, get ready now, because I've sort of predicted a date. Who knows whether that's going to be the date? We just don't know. And we don't know whether it's going to be called then, and we don't know whether it's what date in May it's going to be called. So, I think it's best to just get ready. Keep going and don't give up. By that I mean, it's important to maintain the relationships that you've had. You've obviously been spending time with some of the key decision makers or your local MPs, and making sure you've got those lines of communication open. You've probably got friendships, you've got some intelligence probably that you've already garnered from some of these networks and contacts that you've got. Keep talking to them. Obviously, don't bug them. This is a busy time for them, and but making sure that you're keeping in touch with them so you know what's going on. Engage with the opposition. Don't just engage with the government. Conversely, don't just engage with the opposition if you're hoping for a change of government because you might think it's better for your particular organisation, or perhaps for the sector. If you have that view, don't just engage with one side. It's really important not to engage just with one side. For many reasons, the ACNC provides very clear guidance about not-for-profits being registered as charities and getting deductible gift recipient status, that they must not be biased and they must not be political advocates for any side. You can advocate for an issue, but you can't advocate you can't tell people how to vote. And so it's really important. I think it's incumbent on you to have those relationships with all sides of the parliament, including the crossbench and the Greens. If you haven't already done it, start to prepare some one-pagers on important issues or programs or policies that you've got running. So you might have 3 or 4 different areas that you're working in. Prepare some one-pagers or short little cards or postcards or something that's emailable that you can send to people. You might be able to get them printed and you might use them at an event. You might be able to door knock with them if you're going to speak to people in a particular area. It's always important to have some really clear, crisp, short, focused collateral that you can use depending on what it is that you're doing and whether or not it might benefit from a social campaign or it might benefit from a physical thing that you hand out. It might benefit from an email. It might benefit from something that can be, a document or a report that can be emailed out. You'll know what that is, what the best thing is that you might be able to do for your cause or your organisation. So what to do during the election itself? As I said, we've got about 6 weeks until we get to the election. What do we do when we get there, apart from sort of if you're in a party, political party, both of them are getting into gear to move to a new headquarters for the duration of the election. I'm not sure where the Liberal National Party headquarters will be. Labor's will be in Melbourne. I'm not sure where the Liberals are this year. And by that, there are, literally hundreds of people that descend and live in this particular city for this particular duration. A lot of policy advisors for example, Labor or Liberal are moved to this city, and they are churning out policy documents, churning out media releases. There's a social media unit, there's a reactive unit, there's a crisis unit, there's an economics unit who are pricing and counter pricing. So if someone is who come out with something, the other side will then be pricing it to see whether that assertion is correct. It is like a small army or a military operation. It is very organised, and there is it's planned in that way. So hopefully nothing goes awry. I worked on many election campaigns from inside the tent, if you like. I've worked here in Australia for the Labor Party and also for the British Labor Party, and at different times. And they've got more and more sophisticated over the years. But there's also a travelling party that travels with both leaders and also the other key people. What both sides tend to do during an election is focus on the leader for the daily story. And so if you're lucky enough to be able to get the Prime Minister or the Leader of the Opposition to come to your to your place and do an event with you, they'll usually do one key event a day. They will do other things, but they'll do one key event which will focus on the media and the main focus for television and pictures. If you're lucky enough to be one of those, then that's fantastic. But in addition to that, there is a whole lot of other secondary. Every single candidate in the country has a busy schedule and are doing things and are getting media attention. So, just because there's a travelling party with the leader of the opposition and the Prime Minister doesn't mean that you can't get attention in another way. There are lots and lots and lots of different ways, and we'll explore those now. So what to do during the election? Obviously, one of the things that's really important is to keep on top of the posturing and the position of what's going on around you. What are people saying about your issue? What are people saying about funding of your issue? What are people saying against it or in favour of your position? If you don't already have alerts set up, get Google Alerts set up. If you've got the opportunity to get media monitoring somehow through Meltwater or Isentia, then please do that and set that up. You might be able to get someone to set up some alerts and forward them to you if you don't have that set up yourself. You need to think about some things that will enable you to constructively add to the public and the media debate. There's an awful lot of noise. There's an awful lot of material that's moving around. You need to participate in those debates meaningfully, which means that you've got to do it really fast because issues move on really quickly. And so if something's happening, you've got to grab it that day. Don't think, oh, we'll think about it today and we'll do it tomorrow, because they will have moved on, probably, unless it's some huge issue. So if something happens, get something out an hour later. And I'm not trying to be sort of awful in saying that, but it's the reality. You've really got to jump onto what you're doing. You and your organisation should respond properly and professionally. You can make yourself available for comment. That's the other thing is, get a media list together now if you don't have one. So, all of the key, metropolitan, I'm talking there TV, radio and print and online publications. Get the news desks of those organisations, political reporters down in Canberra in the press gallery. Get all of those on a list. If you're in a particular sector or a particular area, also get the specialist media that may be interested in your story. Have them on a list, and if something breaks, put out an email or what's called a media alert to say, X or Y from our organisation or our association or our not-for-profit or our charity is available for immediate comment. You may not necessarily, you might just add a sentence, we're against this, or we're for this, or we want to comment on this, or we're likely to say this, because that gives them something. But, getting it out and then making some phone calls to let people know that you're available. You could call 10 radio stations, and when you call them, they'll go, great, I'll put you through, we'll take a grab. So if you're doing those sorts of calls, make sure that those people who are making those calls either can do that quick grab, or that the person that's available that is going to do the grab, that's going to do the quick little 30-second radio interview, is available to do it pretty much on the spot, or very shortly after. It's an immediate situation during an election campaign. There is no tomorrow. It's always very much today and very much the next hour, very much the next few minutes. So, you've got to be prepared to get with the programs during an election campaign, because they just won't wait for you to get ready, and you'll just lose the opportunity of contributing, unfortunately, once if you do sit on your hands and take a while to get back to people. So that's sort of the election campaign, pre-election, and the election campaign itself. If anyone's got any questions, please put them up in the box, but I'll continue to talk about what we think about doing post-election. So obviously the election is probably going to be in May at this stage, and who knows whether there's going to be a change of government. I think based on the electoral distribution that's happened, federal electoral distribution, there are 3 new seats, all of which are predicted to go to Labor. That means that the government has to win 4 to 5 seats. They have to get a swing to them in order to win the election. Based on the polls, even though this poll's had a bit of a swing back to the coalition, I think you'd need to see a significant flattening out of support for the opposition before you could say that it's going to be line ball. That said, I think if there was sort of a 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 swing to Labor, that only means you're going to have a majority of about 12, 13, 14, maybe 15 seats. They need to get something above, closer to 3, to get something over a 15-seat majority, which, obviously a government wants to have the biggest majority that they can in order to try and secure some sort of government for more than one term, which makes it more of a stable prospect for them, and enables a government to perhaps put in some policies and ideas that might last longer than a few years. So what do we do after the election? Well, I think one of the things you need to think about is some of the ideas that you've been working on. Think about how you can develop a plan out of those ideas with some really coherent thinking about, what you and your organisation needs from the government. It'll either be a new coalition government with presumably Scott Morrison as Prime Minister, or it will be a Labor government with Bill Shorten as Prime Minister. So, perhaps linking into some of the work you've done previously, developing a really cogent plan about what it is you need. And again, this doesn't have to be really complicated, but I think the more of a clear vision you've got and how they can help you and what the problem is and how you can partner together to solve it, I think is what governments want to hear. Develop potential policy positions around different scenarios. So, don't just go into government and say, we want this and we want it now. We want it. If we don't want it, we'll be cranky, or we'll be sad, and we won't talk to you anymore. Governments really aren't interested in people talking to them like that. I think there's a role for protest always. I think there's a role for anger always. And I think there's a role for mobilising people to indicate that they will change their vote if the governments don't do X or Y. But I think ultimately, if you're trying to have a productive discussion at the outset of what is potentially a new government, you are better placed to have a polite, constructive discussion where you outline perhaps your difference of opinion or your differences of approach, seeing what you might be able to work on together, perhaps anything that is a significant difference put to one side, and agree to work on certain areas together in a collaborative way. Use the opportunity, and you could do some of this before the election. Obviously, you can probably have some of this work done and then refine who you're going to go and meet after the election. But developing messages and targets and a timetable of activities is really important as well. And for you as an organisation or a charity, you need to determine or define what success looks like. A lot of organisations go, okay, and I work with a lot of people, a lot of over a long period of time, and sometimes objectives are realistic, sometimes they're not realistic, and if it's not realistic, then often the boards or the members decide that you're just not doing the right job. So I suppose you've got to get a feel for what is possible. You've got to get a feel for what can be done. That's not to say that you accept if both sides of the parliament are telling you no and something's right, or you want to persist in campaigning for it. There's no reason just to accept that no and just not and go, okay, well, we're just going to go home. We won't bother. You obviously keep going, but you've got to have some sort of realistic framework in which to discuss with both your board and your members and your supporters about what you're aiming for, what might be able to happen over what period of time, based on perhaps the intelligence you've got from the government, and what you yourself understand from other discussions. Picking back up conversations we've got initially, I would bet you that all of you talking and listening to me today have had some sort of discussion with government or someone along the line. Go back and pick those discussions up. If they're in opposition, the odds are that they'll probably be moving into government. They may not necessarily be in the same job, but they might be. And if they're not, then ask them who it is you need to talk to. If they're in government and they were working in the Morrison government, and they were ministerial advisors, and they've lost the election, they will be out of a job. It's an automatic spill of all jobs after the election, and what happens is that some people remain with some MPs and shadow ministers, but a lot of the higher paid senior staff leave and take the opportunity to perhaps go back to what they used to do, corporate roles, other professional roles, academia, etc., etc. So there'll be a change of personnel. So regroup, see who's still there, see who's not there, and really just keep digging and get the intelligence about what's going on, what people are thinking. Create content to be deployed for some stakeholder engagement with politicians. Now, I don't think the Parliament will probably come back till, I don't know, it's hard to know, June or July. It's really hard to know, but they've got to support a new parliamentary sitting calendar that will probably be changed. I would think there will be a case if Labor wins to have a lot of sittings because they've been critical of the coalition's 10 days of parliament in 8 months. And so I would think that there would probably be a move to bring the parliament back as soon as it could be brought back. So there will be opportunities to meet people, perhaps organise events, but also just send out information kits, packs of information electronically, including a tweet, a Facebook post, a blog post, some images, high quality images that they can use, that they can redistribute. And if you can send them to everyone, then the pickup will probably be quite substantial. Call them to let them know that you've sent them to them, the key people that you'd like to use them on their social media platforms and on their online sites. There is a lot of content that a lot of MPs need. And so if you can help by providing some of those on some, key services and issues that are, not particularly controversial, they're obviously not going to run something that's particularly controversial that takes a position that they don't necessarily agree with. But if it's about a local service or a local issue that is something that is pretty broad, they're likely to support it. Someone's just asked me a question. Hi, Therese. Let me just get your question. Bear with me 1 sec. I recommend these kits as PDF form with links, or yeah. I mean, I think it's what I would do is give them. You don't really want your logo used or distorted, but you can give them downloadable resources. So we're talking about an image, a social tile, some suggested words. It's not about you can send them out a background document, but what I'm suggesting is something that's got a practical purpose for them to be able to deploy to their constituents, so that they then put a social tile or a tweet out to their followers on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever they are, or onto their website. That's the purpose of an e-kit. It can be sent as a Word document or as a PDF. Probably a Word document so that they can grab it. It's a bit easier for people to manipulate a Word document. The images can just be in a file, but just make it clear what you're sending them. And I think they'll be really happy to get it. A PDF document is more of a one-pager about you. I'd probably put that information into the email. If there is something else that you want to send to provide some background, you can attach that to the email. It might be a one-page document. It could be a longer document. I wouldn't attach too much because I don't know how you all feel, but I know when I get an email with a lot of attachments, you don't know where to start. So if you get an email that says, "Hi, we're from the bar organisation just down the road. We're sending you, congratulations on being elected. You're part of the new government," or, congratulations in being elected. Might be a Liberal MP or whoever it is. It's won the seat. They're not in government, whatever. Here is some information. You probably know us. We've been here for 42 years. We do this sort of service. We've got this many people we support. this is here's some really vital information that you can tweet and put up on Facebook and Instagram, just to help let people know what we do. It might be something as basic as just a call out, or an action day, or even just a general piece of information about what you do. I think it's a really easy thing to do. We do that a lot with clients, and we have a really good take up with it. It's great. Someone said, just kind of, the former journalist in me has a lot of questions and topics you could expand on. If you'd like to open the floor up now, please, Jessica, please feel like you can ask any questions you like. We're almost finished. This is the last slide, I think. Yeah. So takeaway points. Pre-election, you need, a two-tier strategy, one a media strategy, and the other a more complex narrative and policy outcome-driven narrative that you can approach stakeholders with. During the election, make sure you have a coherent position for the organisation, and don't be afraid to front up to the media and tell them that you've got a view. If you don't tell them, they're not going to come to you necessarily if you don't have any sort of notoriety. You've got to get in front of them. Post-election, ensure that you've got a plan and are keeping conversations alive with politicians that can help you deliver on your plan. Jessica, please pop any of, or if anyone else has got any other questions, What is in your toolbox of websites and apps? What do you use for design? Yes, what do you use for design? Conference calls, social media scheduling, newsletters, CRM. Okay, I'll tell you. We use both Canva and InDesign. We use Canva for social tiles for some clients. We use InDesign as well for infographics or for documents. We often will produce, not only write, but produce documents for organisations like ACOS or whoever, or other not-for-profits, or annual reports, or all sorts of things which require a high level of design. And InDesign is great. We use the Adobe Creative Suite, which obviously also has other components as well, which are require a bit more knowledge. Anyone can use InDesign. If I've learnt it, then I reckon anyone can do it. For conference calls, we use Skype. We have Skype open. We're a virtual agency, and so people work in either co-working spaces or in their home-based office or wherever they are. And we use Skype all the time. We have Skype open various chats. So we have a team chat. Everyone just asks questions of each other, copies each other in. We have a Scrum chat. We have a daily Scrum. We have team meetings for things like, different initiatives, different projects. We have regular meetings scheduled for those. We use Skype for all of those. So we will ring. And the thing is, we often have people who are overseas. We've got staff in Indonesia, and we've also got staff in the US and the UK. And because of that, we have the capacity to be able to join those people onto Skype via Skype without too much hassle. You just sit there, you can be anywhere, and you can take a call for free. It's pretty good. Social media scheduling, we use Buffer, just because we find it clean and easy. We've got a platform where we use 72, I think it's up to 72 feeds that we can use, or maybe it's 100. Because we schedule for a lot of clients as well as ourselves. For newsletters, we actually have both Campaign Monitor and MailChimp. We use both of them. CRM, we use Highrise. We used to use Basecamp for project management, but we now use something called 10,000 Feet. So I'm speaking about all this tomorrow, actually, interestingly. I'm speaking at an umbrella conference tomorrow to independent agencies, just to talk about how we make all of this virtual workplace function for us. So it's actually quite interesting. And Jessica said, I found LinkedIn the most challenging platform to build a following on. Um, I have nearly 10,000 connections on LinkedIn. Right at the very beginning, like nearly 10 years ago, I only had about 100, and I worked at it and got about 500. And since then, I really haven't had to do much work on it. It just sort of grows organically. I'm sure I've got some people on there that are sort of slightly strange. But if someone messages me that are seemingly, trying to sell me some sort of, you know, whatever from some other place that I don't know of, I just remove them, block them as a contact. Um, I use it as I reckon probably 90% of the contacts I've got on LinkedIn are probably useful. I use it as a bugling service. I use it as a service just to tell people what I'm doing. I don't sit on it and communicate. I in fact don't even have the emails coming into my inbox because it would be too huge. I probably get 20 requests a week to connect, or I don't know, more. So I think it's a useful shout out. It's a useful bugling service, I find, but I find that it's not the only. I mean, some people love different platforms. My happy place is Instagram. I used to hang out in other places. I now have a team, and I have a team who do social media for us and for me, and I just don't hang out there anymore. I hang out in Instagram because I find other stuff there that I've got my own personal feed, I've got my company feed, and I like sitting there. If I'm going to goof off, that's where I goof off. Um, I don't goof off anywhere else. My husband, who is a former journalist, Andrew Mears in the Sydney Morning Herald, he's on Twitter. He now works for Bill Shorten as the senior digital advisor. He goofs off on Twitter, and when you look at how many hours he's spent on Twitter in a year, it's probably more than he's spoken to his kids maybe. But that's just life for him, and he has a different view about Twitter, and I get a lot of intel from him and other people from other different ways. So, people have different places that they like to hang out on. We use them. We use all of them. And we just find that they're all valuable for all different reasons. And I just don't put, for example, I'm doing, and I'll move on to this in terms of what I was going to tell you. I've got some events in Sydney, Melbourne, and Canberra next week. They're free workshops if anyone is in a city. We'll email you all with the registration details, and you can come along to those. They're 2-hour workshops looking at the election and in more detail than today. So if you're in central Sydney, Melbourne, or Canberra, then please feel free to come along. We'll be giving out a goodie bag of stuff. We've got a little card pack of inspiration, which is sort of 35 cards, which is a sort of almost a card pack to help you run a campaign and a project, which covers everything from advertising, content, social media, government engagement, PR, strategic communications. So we're going to be giving those out. We've only just got them back from the printer today. And we'll also give everyone a Byron Bay cookie as well. So feel free to come to those. But we use a lot of social media to...
It's 12 hours.
So we use social media a lot to publicise those sorts of events and advertise. It's always good when I meet someone and I don't know them and they say, I've seen you on social media. And so it just is proof, I suppose, that advertising works sometimes. So, we use social media for a whole lot of different things. Now, I don't know whether anyone's got any other questions, but we will email you. I don't know whether any of you are coming along to, or any of you coming along to any of these workshops. If not, really feel free to come. I think they'll be quite valuable. They're going to be, we'll deep dive a bit more than we have today. And I think it'll be quite an interesting discussion. And there's like 100 people in Sydney, 80 in Melbourne, and about 40 or 50 in Canberra. So they're big crowds, and I think they'll be pretty big, pretty interesting discussions. So I hope some of you can join it. So thanks so much. We'll email you registration details for those today, and we'll also email you the slides as well for this. And we'll also be putting a recording of this, in case you want to relive it, onto our YouTube channel, which you can find by searching 50 Acres TV. So thanks so much. Best of luck. I do urge you all to do something rather than do nothing. I think it's really important. I think politicians are duty bound to respond and to answer and to listen, and we need to be able to keep them account. So I think we've got to keep working at it, because that's what we do. So good luck, and have an enjoyable next few months. And I'll do another. Be doing these monthly again now, starting up this month. So we'll keep these up monthly, and I'll do something. I'm not sure what we're going to do next month, but it'll possibly be something around the election, or it might be thinking about post-election. I'm not quite sure, but we'll do another one in about a month's time. So thanks so much, and have a lovely day, everyone. And keep watching the news, because it's going to be interesting.